A couple weeks ago, I was listening to a hyperpop playlist and I realized, there's something about this song that sounds cold. I didn't think much of it until a few minutes later when I heard another song that sounded cold too, but something was interesting about it. It didn't use the same kinds of instruments, but both songs gave me that same frosty feeling. Being that it is currently winter in the northern hemisphere, I thought it would be a good idea to dive deep into for a video. So I started listening to a bunch of songs, looking for other songs that had this cold sound. I ended up creating a playlist and focused in on the different ways that cold sound was created through different instruments. I recreated a bunch of different sounds so I could use them in my own music, and I thought I'd share with you some of the main ones. This is how to make a cold hyperpop song, and I'm going to go over 5 different tips on how to create that cold sound. Also, if you watch all the way to the end of the video, I've got something special I cooked up for you. Stay tuned for that. To start off, I've got this acapella from the last video I made. I just threw some drums and a bass together, and this is what it sounds like so far. Not a bad sound. You don't have to add anything in there. Tip number 1 is some drum and bass loops. It's a little confusing. I'm talking about the genre drum and bass, and there are drum loops that sound like that. I threw 3 loops in there. This is what they all sound like. Altogether, they sound like this. In the song that I was referencing for this, it took out a lot of the low end, so I put in a high pass here. This isn't necessary, but I added a chorus. This adds like some weird lasery, like swooshing sounds. And then I went a little extra and I added a phaser on there as well. I was really going for that swooping, lasery sound. Altogether, it sounds like this with the drum loop in. The second tip to get that cold sound is having a pluck on there with a lot of reverb. An important thing is to keep it simple. Barely any notes in there. This is the pluck I'm using. It's just a simple square pluck with a ton of reverb on it. The third tip I've got on here is like a vocal style synth. I made this preset in Serum using my own voice. I just recorded myself just saying, and then I put some OTT on it, and then I threw it into Serum, and you can actually turn that into a synth. So here's what it sounds like. Kind of sounds like a vocal, but also not really. And then I put a gate on it through this LFO. And here's what the vocal style synths sound like with the entire track. Okay, I've got tip number 4, and that is to use ARPs instead of chords. You can make it sound more interesting and also give it that little cold sound using an ARP. And one of the most important things is to have the delay overlap on itself. Here's what I mean. You can really hear the delay on it, and when you do an ARP, it will play the note from before onto the new note. It will just like kind of sound muddy, but in a good way. Here's the MIDI that I wrote out for this ARP. It follows the bass pattern down here. A, G sharp, F sharp, D. If you're ever stuck when you're writing an ARP, one thing that's helpful is to find the key and just do the pentatonic scale on top of it. That's kind of what I'm doing here. This is the 1, 5, 3, 2. And that's the entire upper half of the ARP. One last thing I didn't mention is the reverb. I have it automated on. You'll see it will automate to be like a lot of reverb, so it eventually drowns out the dry signal. I have that automated to open right here, and it just looks like this. Here's what it sounds like on its own. And here it is with the beat I built around it. It's more of a trap style beat, but you still hear that in hyperpop. For tip number 5, I wrote down huge pads. When I was preparing for this, I created like a Spotify playlist. I wanted to really listen to a bunch of songs that sounded like this. Many of them, when they use pads, it's more of like a one shot. I wrote out more of a pluck MIDI than a pad MIDI. This is the preset that I made for it. It's just a big old super saw pad. Something I guess you can take away from this video is when you're writing out like ARP stuff, you can keep the top MIDI the same and it will sound nice. All of these are the same notes and I just changed the ones underneath it to kind of fit with the chord. Here is what it sounds like with the vocal. And then I've got a little bonus instrument in there. It's crazy stuff going on in here. This was the song I referenced that kind of had something similar. What is cool about it is making a glitch sort of sound. I zoomed in a bunch and then I could write, real small stuff. It's nothing crazy when you zoom in on it. This is fun to go back and forth. All right, so let's just play it. It sounds like a bunch of random notes until you put it together with everything. So here's what it sounds like. All right, so that's my 5 tips on how to make a cold hyperpop song. Outside of adding like wind sounds and adding like, I don't know, jingle bells. All right, what I mentioned before at the beginning of the video, I wanted to give you a little present for watching all the way to the end. All of the presets in this video I'm going to be putting in the description. Also, if you don't have Serum, I'll include them as one shots. I'm pretty sure I have 20 total, so have fun with that. If you liked the video, make sure to smash like and subscribe if you're new. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.